Welcome, folks, to Crypto News Global. I'm your host, Nick Toka. Today is episode 124, June 11th, 2025. And Bitwise CEO calls Bitcoin the best horse in the race to explain accelerated corporate buys. Also, BitcoinPrice prepares for volatility as spot supply vanishes. Before we get into our stories, Bitcoin technical analysis, I want to show you what might be one of the most inspirational videos I've seen in a very long time from a face that every one of us knows. I have the full video in the comments of the video show notes, but let's just check this out if we could. You're all going to know who this is in just a second. Very inspirational. I recommend you listen to the whole thing. It's about 20 minutes. I'm just going to play the first little bit of it, and let's let it fly.
I'm delighted to see everybody here today, and the number one reason I'm delighted is because this speech is for you. I have traveled the world and I've spoken about Bitcoin, and I've told countries why they needed Bitcoin, and I told institutional investors why they needed Bitcoin, and I've told boardrooms and companies and CEOs why they need Bitcoin. And I've spoken to the disembodied spirits about why our children's children need Bitcoin. But my presentation today is directed at the 8 billion people on the planet. It's the 21 ways to wealth for every individual, every family, every small business, every entrepreneur. Is not for the billion-dollar public companies, it's for everybody. And I focused for quite a while on that. So this is for you. The 21 ways to wealth.
They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear this.
Geez.
I never post stuff like...
The first way to wealth. Clarity. Clarity is the topic. And that clarity of mind comes when you realize that Bitcoin is capital, perfected capital, programmable capital, incorruptible capital. The significance of that is every smart person, every thoughtful individual everywhere in the world is going to want perfected capital. Every one of your enemies is going to want incorruptible capital, and all of the AIs are going to want programmable capital. The demand for this is huge. What's it worth? It's worth half of everything. Half of everything.
Yeah, baby. Half of everything. Let's get into it. Welcome again to Crypto News Global. Half of everything. So we're talking $900 trillion of capital on Earth as we speak. Half of everything is what Michael Saylor is predicting. And I don't think he's incorrect. It is the one asset that, like he said, is uncorruptible, it's unchangeable, and it will continue to hold its value forever because there can only be 21 million Bitcoin. Everything else will end up going to zero. People think the US dollar, oh, the US dollar is great. Well, the US dollar, if you think about it, back in, if you bought a house in 1900, what would it have cost you? 1,000? 10,000? Now it's 1 million. How many zeros went away on that? Right? Gold, there's 2%, 3% more, I believe about 2% more mined every year. You multiply that by, I believe the calculation is 70 something years, but we'll call it 50 years. So 50 times 2%, 100%. So that's going to it's going to be worth half of what it was in 50 years. So in 100 years, it's going to be worth 25% of what it's worth right now. Even gold. When you talk about the printing of money, the US, the mighty fiat US dollar, right? With the amount they're printing, in 2020, I believe they doubled the money plus supply. I think it was either 50 or 100% of the money supply. So right away, it was worth half of what it was immediately. So people think, they brought the interest rates down to zero during COVID, and the stocks went flying, and my house value went way up. Well, what really happened is they printed so much money that your house was simply just worth the same amount, but you needed twice as much of the fiat money to buy it because there was now twice the actual money supply. So you've got to look at that aspect when you're thinking about money. And the difference between that and Bitcoin, where Bitcoin will never change and the value of Bitcoin will continue to go up when everything else will go down. What is it worth? Saylor says half of everything. I love it. I highly recommend you go through all 21 steps. I listened to it about 3 times. As I always suggest, take your time, listen to it in the car, listen to it when you're doing other things in the house. Sometimes it's hard when other people are around, they don't want to listen to it. The car is the best place. You can focus, and you're doing 2 things at once. You're driving somewhere where you would have gone anywhere, and maybe you would have been listening to some, the same old playlist over and over that you always listen to, or you could get some real satisfaction by going into audiobooks. I would, again, really suggest you listen to these 21 steps from Michael Saylor. I'd also suggest you go into the books that I have in the show notes lower down. I've got a good 5, 6, 7 books there that will give you a good, decent degree of financial literacy, and they're 100% free. I've got the links to all the stuff. Everything's always free, guys. On my channel, I ain't pushing for anybody. I'm always pushing the free stuff because it is available for free. If you feel like you like it, you enjoyed it, and you want to support the actual author of the book, by all means, go ahead, buy the Amazon book or, whatever, the hard copy. But the free stuff is there for you, and nobody's profiting from that. It turns out that almost every book you can think of, if you just do a YouTube search and type in, the Bitcoin Standard, full audiobook, for example, it's there for free. Almost every single book you could think of. I've found every single book that I've ever typed in except for one, which was this stop smoking thingy, which is strangely not free. You would think that should be the one that's free, but it was Henry Carr something how to stop smoking. But every other book I've ever searched for, I've been able to find for free. And in many cases, there are multiple different links. You kind of go through the one you want. Some are in, some computerized crappy audio. Other ones are actually narrated by a real person. I recommend those highly. And other ones are choppy. Other ones are, some Mandarin version or something like that. But you will be able to find a good English version, or maybe even a version in another language if that's what you prefer. But they're all there. They're all free. I'd highly recommend that you check these things out. And a good starting point is that Michael Saylor 21 points to wealth. And I have the link to that full video as well. That was about a month ago when he was at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas. Let's get right into some Bitcoin technical analysis for the Borowskis. Bitcoin currently sitting down about 0.75%, 108,700. We came close to hitting an all-time high yet again today, but the news came in about, they're not going to cut rates again, Powell, because inflation was pretty steady. And, when talking about inflation, right, they base it on a CPI index, a basket of goods. But what people don't know is that basket of goods, they continue changing, right? So what makes you think that they're choosing these items that are normal items? Perhaps my theory is they're choosing items that don't change in value very much. So they tell you inflation's, 2-3%, but ultimately, I think we're always talking 7 to even 10% inflation, and they just keep it under the radar because they keep changing the items that are in the basket of goods, the CPI. So interest rates aren't coming down. Once Bitcoin and the rest of the markets heard that, the price immediately turned around. And right now, sitting at almost 109 grand, can we complain? It's about $2,000 off the all-time high. Ethereum down 0.25%, 27.76. Solana down 2.5%, $160. XRP down 1.5%, 225. Doge down 1.8% at 19 cents. Looking at the daily crypto bubbles, we have pretty much everything in the red today, about 90% in the red. We've got Kaya up 16%, SPX up 6%, most other things in the red for the day. Taking a look at the weekly, that same Kaya up 57%. AB, what's this, the Alphabet coin? Yep, AB up 36%, Fartcoin up 45%, SPX 42%, Uni, which is Uniswap, 29% for the week. Zooming out to the monthly, we've got about 70-30, red over green, SPX up 126%, Hype up 76%, AB 64%. Market cap by coin, we've got a Bitcoin $2.158 trillion, Ethereum $334 billion, XRP $132 billion, Solana $84 billion, Doge $28 billion, Tron $26 billion, Cardano $24 billion, and Hype $13.8 billion as we speak. Total market cap is sitting at $3.36 trillion, with Bitcoin holding 64.1% of that, Ethereum 10%, and XRP 4%. M2 money supply, the money printer continues to go burr. The money supply is in pink, the Bitcoin price in white, and we see that there's a very, very close correlation between the two, which continues. There's generally about a 90-day trailing timeline from the price of the M2 money supply until the price of the Bitcoin. So whatever happens in the M2, 90 days later, the same thing seems to happen in Bitcoin. So this is a good spot to look at right here. You see that the price went up. 90 days later, the price of Bitcoin went up. Same kind of thing here. M2 up. 90 days later, Bitcoin up. Then Bitcoin was down. See this? M2 down here, Bitcoin down, M2 down, Bitcoin down, and finally M2 money supply currently way up again. And the money printer is going to be turned on very, very shortly in the US as well. They're going to have to print to keep this big, beautiful bill that's being proposed. And I presume that trillions are going to be printed. There's really a perfect storm of many things happening right now. They're all culminating until right into the hands of Bitcoin and the price appreciation of Bitcoin. We've got the money printing, inflation probably going up, the interest rates likely they're going to have to come down. We've talked about this before. There with the inflation, I think they're artificially keeping it sideways. You know, it came in at I think 2.9% or 2.6% today. As I mentioned, this is largely artificial, but it doesn't matter because that's what they look at. So money printer is going to go crazy. The interest rates are going to have to come down because this year there is just under $10 trillion in debt that the U.S. has to refinance, and it's just like refinancing your house. As you all know, if your house mortgage rate, if you needed to refinance in this past couple of years, or if you're in a variable rate, the rates are super high. You've had to pay so much more for the exact same money, right, for the same mortgage. So the same thing is going to happen with the states, except we're talking about $10 trillion, and they're going to have to refinance at a high interest rate. This ain't happening, folks. There's no way they're going to allow that to happen. So that's why you keep hearing about Trump firing Powell, and Trump keeps asking about, lowering interest rates, and they never do. Stubborn. Again, it's a conspiracy, man. Probably what's going to happen is at some point they're going to really drop these rates just like they did in 2020 during COVID. During COVID, they basically dropped the rates to zero. It went from, I think, 2% to zero. And then Powell said, I am not going to raise interest rates for any foreseeable time. He said, until 2024. And what happened? Meanwhile, while all the businesses are closing, you're not allowed to go to the gym. You're not allowed to have a mom and pop brick and mortar shop. All the, Amazon stock goes flying. All the securities went up, right? The rates went to zero. All the stock market went way up, 2-3 times valuation. The guys sitting in, their pool side in their mansions, the bankers, all got rich off this because everything rebounded. It was the best year in 30 or 40 years, that 2020. So all the bankers got rich and all the businesses went under, right? Real estate also did well. The prices went way up in real estate. So if we see a similar kind of thing where the interest rates really get dropped for whatever reason, and, as it stands, everything's all, fine. There's riots in the States a little bit here and there about the ICE, deporting illegal aliens, right? Or people without their papers, I suppose, or criminals. So the Democrats are crying boo-hoo, and, why are they deporting people? Well, it's against the law, right? So we've got these minor things happening. We still have this war in Israel. We still have this war in Ukraine, Russia. But on a global scale, think about this compared to COVID, right? This is everything's going fine right now. Imagine if there's some big kind of turmoil that happens coming up. Nobody looks at that, right? Immediately, what's going to happen? Rates are going to go to zero again, right? All the risk-on assets are going to fly through the roof. So, Bitcoin went from, I believe it was around $3,000, 3 or 4,000 to 70 grand pretty damn fast, right? So, a 20x in a year when that shit all went down. So you don't know what's going to happen in the near future. Bitcoin seems to thrive in these type of opportunities when all the rest of the, the fiat and everything's going down, not to mention with all this printing. But when these interest rates do go down, even if nothing goes on in the world and everything's fine, and, we all hope that everything is fine, they will have to drop rates toward the end of the year in order to finance. I believe it's around September, October, where they've got to refinance this debt. So I anticipate the rates are going to have to go down. If not, Trump, even though I don't think he has the legal authority to fire Powell, I think he's going to get him the hell out of there one way or the other. Taking a look at the total hash rate, and as we know, the price of Bitcoin follows the hash. Right now, we're very close to the all-time high. Again, we're sitting at 900 billion terahashes per second. And the Bitcoin price also way up. Again, I seem to think that the Bitcoin price kind of follows a little behind the hash rate. As we see here historically, the Bitcoin price is in black and the hash rate is in blue here. So we see a bit of a trend here. Not as close as the M2 money supply, but if you look throughout the year here, and let's see if we can zoom out any more. With this exception in 2020, 2021, you do see that it follows relatively close to the hash rate. So interesting to look at that as well. Looks like the hash rate is taking a sudden turn positive here. And I think that sometime this year they will hit 1 trillion terahashes a second. Crypto Fear and Greed Index puts us at a 61 in greed. Yesterday was 65 in greed. Last week a 55 in neutral. There are 1,035 days left until the next Bitcoin halving in 2028, with 149,139 blocks. Until then, global assets worldwide, we have gold at 22.7 trillion bucks, Microsoft 3.5 trillion, Nvidia 3.4, Apple 3 trillion, Amazon 2.2 trillion, Google 2.1 trillion, Bitcoin 2.15 trillion, just looks like 20 billion, 2 billion behind Google. So we could see Bitcoin very quickly jumping right back into the number 5 position if things turn around, and I think they will over the next little while. I wouldn't be surprised if they overtake all these companies to become the number 2 asset worldwide before the end of the year. Silver behind Bitcoin at 2 trillion and Meta 1.7 trillion bucks. You can currently get 922 satoshis for 1 fiat US dollar. Looking at the US dollar, getting so close to that number flipping. The US national debt currently 36 trillion 967 billion. In about a week or so, that's going to be 37 trillion bucks. That equals to 107,905 per U.S. citizen, or 323,051 per U.S. taxpayer. The Doge clock going the opposite way in terms of money savings is currently at 515 billion bucks, which equals 4,584 per U.S. taxpayer thus far, which is approximately $1,000 a month per U.S. taxpayer. So the only thing that seems to be going in the right direction is that Doge. Even though Elon stepped down, they had that whole spat between Trump and him last week. I saw today that he apologized, and Elon, I took it too far. My apologies. So I knew this wouldn't be long-lived. The savings, look, he was pissed off because he put his business aside. He worked for free. People were vandalizing his dealerships, burning his cars, tainting his name, right? He saved $500 billion for U.S. taxpayers, and then Trump turns around with his big beautiful bill, and he wants to print $7 trillion. He wants to spend. He wants to create an unlimited debt ceiling, get rid of that completely. But chances are they're going to spend about $7 trillion in the budget. So he's thinking, what the fuck? I just lost all my shit. I stopped working. My company went to crap. My stocks went down. I did everything I could, and now I saved $500 billion. Now you're going to you're going to spend $7 trillion, right? Additionally, Trump also announced he was going to get rid of the EV incentive, electric vehicle incentive, which gives you between $5,000 and $10,000, depending on where you live, in rebates when buying a electric car. So certainly a lot of people that were buying these electric cars were going for this incentive, right? So that's going to affect his company as well. Now, looking at our stories, we've got Bitwise CEO calls Bitcoin the best horse in the race to explain accelerated corporate buys. Matt Hugin said the megatrend of public companies adding Bitcoin to treasury reserves will continue accelerating as the movement is still in its early stages. Hugin made the statement during June 10th interview on CNBC, where he highlighted that 79 listed firms now hold roughly $57 billion worth of Bitcoin as of the end of March. Drivers and limits of adoption. Corporations have historically placed surplus cash in short-term treasuries or bank deposits to store value. However, Hugin argued that unprecedented deficits and money creation now push finance chiefs to seek alternative store value. That's what I was saying, right? Unprecedented deficits. So, more budget spending, and money printing, money creation now push finance chiefs to seek alternative stores of value. So the big whales are looking for somewhere to put their money that's going to hold its value. They're starting to get scared of bonds because they're pretty much useless. The US dollar keeps degrading in value. Again, useless. They could put their money in gold, but again, as we talked about, gold is also a depreciative asset in the long run. And then there's Bitcoin. Corporations need another way to protect their wealth from degradation, and they're turning to the best horse in that race, which is Bitcoin. Hugin added that equity markets have rewarded companies that disclose purchases, reinforcing the appeal of balance sheet exposure. Hugin linked corporate demand to rising confidence in Bitcoin role as digital gold. Binance Research's June monthly market insights reported reiterated the fast growth. According to the report, 116 public firms now control approximately 809,000 Bitcoin as of May 31st, up from 312 1 year earlier. More than 25 companies have revealed new allocations since April. Right. So what they're saying in this statement is everybody who puts Bitcoin on the balance sheet and announces it, their stock immediately goes up. I mean, we've got Saylor stock that has been up 3,000%, I think, in the past 2 years. So, Metaplanet, their stock went up quite a bit. So any company that puts Bitcoin on the balance sheet, except for GameStop, which is sadly, they also announced they're going to be buying more Bitcoin just today. But it was kind of a tanking stock, which I think that's why GameStop took the approach of going into Bitcoin. They had a shitload of cash sitting on the side. A very, very good play for GameStop. strangely, I think it's one of the very few companies, if not the only company, whose stock didn't go up when they actually bought Bitcoin. So it's a little backwards, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some huge pump in GameStop as well. But pretty much every company that puts Bitcoin on the balance sheet and says, yeah, we now own blah, blah, blah Bitcoin, even if it's 100 Bitcoin, their stock goes way up. Average monthly buying exceeds 40,000 Bitcoin, aided by recent entrants such as Trump Media, Nakamoto, GameStop, and PSG. Strategy remains the large holder, making up nearly 72% of the total. Renewed interest in Outlook. Furthermore, the report noted that a fresh all-time price near 112,000 renewed corporate FOMO as boards pursue both upside and inflation protection. It's also cited improving U.S. regulatory signals and 2025 accounting changes that will allow fair value treatment, removing impairment charges that once discouraged treasurers. So this fair value accounting basically means you can write off your unrealized gains or unrealized losses against your balance sheet as your corporation. Hugin projected that corporate treasuries could exceed 1 million BTC by 2026 if current purchase rates persist. Meanwhile, Binance Research frames the target as attainable under the stable macro conditions and continued regulatory progress. Additionally, Bitwise CEO expects more cash-rich multinationals to diversify this year as concerns about dollar debasement remain at the forefront of their minds. He believes that this will eventually push Bitcoin allocations from a niche practice to a mainstream treasury management norm. Yeah, baby. That is what we're waiting for. There's going to be a point where every single company is going to have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. If they don't, they're just going to fall behind. So right now, it's a race. It really is. You either have Bitcoin on your balance sheet to show that your cash supply is sustainable and not being debased by the ever printing of more US dollars, or you don't, and you're sucked into the US dollar debasement. If you got $1 billion in cash as a corporation and U.S. prints, doubles the money supply, well, your $1 billion immediately is worth 500 million, right? It's worth half if the money supply doubles. And over time, the money supply does double, and then it doubles again, and then it doubles again, and doubles it again. And you end up with, jack all. In fact, I can take a peek here to find money supply historically. And let's see, M2 money supply. St. Louis? No. What is the historical U.S. money supply? That's what we're looking for. I wish it had a longer term. Let's get back to that screen here. We can go to max, and it won't let us do the maximum. 10 years, fine. You see 12K US billion, and now we are at 21K billion, and you see the huge jump. So right here, the money supply effectively was up about 40%, but from 2016 it doubled, and now from that same time frame, from we'll call it 2020, it's gone up a little bit. Let's zoom in. Yeah, so we see in the past 3 months it's going way up. This is just for the US. The other M2 money supply chart that I had earlier, global money supply, is based on the biggest 21 central banks around the world. This that I brought up here is just the US. So we see that it started printing now. The China's printed a shitload. Europe's been printing, and now it seems that it is America's turn. America, let's print some fiat and frickin' debase our dollar. Bitcoin, however, price prepares for volatility as spot supply vanishes. See, everybody's been talking about a Bitcoin supply shock, and here it is incoming. Bitcoin's recent rally occurred as funding rates turned negative and BTC held on exchanges and OTC desks shrank. Bitcoin price has consistently risen even as the trading volume dropped to its lowest level since the start of 2023-2026 cycle. Retail investor activity is subdued and funding rates in perpetual swaps recently brushed against negative territory. It's an unusual backdrop for a price pushing toward all-time highs. Yet, beneath the surface, on-chain data points to something else, a stealth accumulation phase. While the markets appear calm, the supply side is quietly drying up, with Bitcoin futures open interest hovering near record highs. The market is tightly coiled, setting the stage for a perfect storm. Bitcoin held on exchanges continues to fall, even as Bitcoin demand, in particular in the U.S., continues rising. The number of Bitcoins held on centralized crypto exchanges continue to decline. Since the beginning of 2025, balances have dropped another 14%, now just to 2.5 million Bitcoin, a level last seen in August 2022. This trend typically signals growing investor confidence and long-term holding behavior. Coins are being moved into cold storage or custodial wallets, reducing the liquid supply available for sale. Large entities often withdraw Bitcoin after buying, reinforcing the view that accumulation is underway. With fewer coins readily available to dump, short-term sell pressure weakens. Over-the-counter Bitcoin balances plummet. OTC desks, which facilitate large off-exchange trades, are now showing signs of tightening supply. While these desks usually operate by matching buyers and sellers, they still rely on holding Bitcoin reserves to enable fast and credible execution. This is what I was talking about, I think, on the last episode, where once the OTC counter dries up, they're going to have to go to the exchanges, and it's going to have to be a more public purchase for these corporations, and they're not going to be able to hide very much with their massive purchases anymore. Currently, those reserves are historic lows. According to CryptoQuant, over-the-counter addresses associated with miners have seen a 19% drop in balances since January, now holding just 134,000 Bitcoin. This data aggregates inflows from over two distinct one-hop addresses connected to mining pools, excluding miners themselves and centralized exchange addresses. When exchange and over-the-counter liquidity dry up, the available float shrinks dramatically. In a rising market, this dynamic can amplify price movements as demand chases an increasingly scarce asset. Funding rates slip into negative territory. In such a tight supply environment, even modest demand can move prices sharply, especially when the market is positioned the wrong way. The funding rate situation illustrates this well. Funding rates are periodic payments between long-term and short-term traders and potential futures contracts, reflecting the market's directional bias. Positive rates mean longs are paying shorts, typically a sign of bullish sentiment. Negative rates indicate short dominance and often signal local corrections. However, when negative funding coincides with rising Bitcoin prices, it's a different story. It suggests that despite short-term traders dominating, the spot market is absorbing sell pressure, a potential sign of strong underlying demand. This rare pattern has appeared 3 times during this cycle, each followed by a significant price upsurge. A fourth instance may have occurred recently between June 6th and June 8th. Funding rates turned negative while Bitcoin shot to 110,000 from 104. This kind of move suggests the rally may still have legs, especially if short positions continue to get liquidated, a feedback loop that can drive prices even higher. Bitcoin market may seem quiet at the moment, but that may be the point. The shrinking liquid supply suggests Bitcoin isn't rising on euphoric investor sentiment or volume, but on a growing mismatch between heavy leverage use and real spot demand. In this kind of setup, any forced liquidation or price dislocation in derivatives could trigger an explosive move higher. Yeah, I'm kind of expecting the same thing as well. It's almost like for a long time, Bitcoin was just being bought for Bitcoin, right? It was just retail investors. Now, the biggest investors are these huge conglomerates, BlackRock, Strategy, governments, pension funds, and they are finding some utility in it. It wasn't like before where it was just completely speculative. Now, huge companies and countries are buying it as a hedge against inflation. So I believe this is going to continue. Again, historically, the cycle peak of the Bitcoin price is the year after the halving, around October, November. So we still have, a good, 4 months to pump. Furthermore, there's a lot of speculation that this will be a little different, that the price will continue to go up. It won't go up as quickly, but it's going to continue, and there won't be this dip the way these 4-year cycles have worked in the past. This is a big challenge for hodlers, long-term hodlers. If it's a fearful thing for people, they could certainly just continue hodling into the next 4 years, right? If you need your money, you can look at historical patterns, and that might be around the time you want to get out, depending on when you got in, right? The cycle low is generally 1 year and 2 or 3 months after the cycle peak. So in the last Bitcoin cycle, for example, the cycle peak was October 2021, and the cycle low was January of 2023. Yeah. So end of 2022, beginning of 2023. So if you bought in then, you would not give a shit what was going on right now, because you're already way up and you're just sitting on gains. You're sitting on your couch, sipping a cup of coffee or a good drink, and just enjoying, because everything is in gains right now. Right? If we just check out our trading view, if you bought in here, the right idea, ideally, is you want to sell here, cycle peak. Here we are, it looks like November 9th, 2021. And you want to buy in a year and 2 or 3 months after that, which is the cycle low, and December from November, so exactly a year after, until about a year and 2 or 3 months would be the cycle low. So it went from 70 grand to 16,000. All right, so if we quickly do the math on that, 16,000 divided by 70,000. So it went down almost 80% from the cycle peak. Again, if you bought in here, you wouldn't give a shit what was happening right now, folks. Why would you care when you bought in here and the price is up here? Now, at this point, you've got Michael Saylor and you have a lot of rich people, BlackRock. They don't care. They will just keep buying the top. They've got the money. They've already made a lot of purchases way down here. So, fine, their average price is going up a bit. But for them, it's the long-term accumulation where they know that the price over the long run, even if there is, a cycle low again, they don't care, because they will just keep buying it. So as much as they'll buy, 100 Bitcoins or 1,000 Bitcoins here, if the price tanks, well, then they're going to buy 5,000, right? So follow the smart money. This is always a good approach. Do as they do, not as they say. They can say whatever they want, but what are they really doing? That's what you want to look at. Who's buying? Are they buying quietly? Because they all are, right? Except for Michael Saylor and Strategy B. Everybody else is buying quietly. And one day, when they're finished buying, when they own 5% of the supply, which is, I think, the goal of a lot of these companies, and even U.S. government, Bitcoin Treasury, I believe the goal, Cynthia Lummis is telling them to buy 20% of the total supply, right? So, but I believe once they get to around 5%, they're going to announce it, right? At that point, it's just money in the bank. Oh yeah, by the way, we just bought. It's the same thing as what BlackRock did, right, with their ETFs. Do you think that their ETFs launched and then they bought Bitcoin? No, they were buying for a long, long time before that. They then allowed the price to go up and up and up and up, and by the time it was approved, they'd already made billions on this thing, right? So again, like everything else, buy low, sell high. That never changes. It doesn't matter if you're buying Bitcoin, if you're buying stocks, if you're buying gold, silver, real estate. Buy low, sell high. If you're talking about the markets, buy on a red day when everything's gone to shit, bad day, and the day of the tariffs, for example. Oh my God, the tariffs, the world's coming to an end. What the smart people were doing? They were buying, right? Everybody else, Tesla stock went down by like 40%. Smart money was buying it. 2 weeks later, it was back up. So these are the kind of downturns you want to take advantage of. This is what the smart money does. Make no mistake. We've already talked about in previous episodes how Berkshire Hathaway, the investment firm that is owned by the richest most prolific investor in the world, sold everything. They're out of stocks. They're sitting in cash right now. They're not going to be very happy with what's happening in cash, but Warren Buffett has sold everything. They got out of everything. They're in cash. They're waiting for everything to tank, and then they're going to buy back in. Right? It's simple. This is what they've done in the past. They have some kind of previous knowledge that this is going to happen. We've got Rich Dad Robert Kiyosaki talking about the collapse of the whole economy. And of course, if that happens, then that's going to collapse the stocks. And the rich people are sitting on the sidelines in cash, and they're going to buy in. If the price of Bitcoin goes down, they're going to then buy in. So keep this stuff in mind. Always buy on a red day and sell on a green day, if not HODL for long periods of time. Anyone who's held Bitcoin for over 4 years has made money. Just remember that. Do not fear sell. If you feel like you missed the boat and you didn't sell in time and the cycle peak is come and gone, well, if you hold on for another 4 years, you'll be back probably 3, 4, 5 times where you were at in this cycle peak. Folks, remember, there is approximately $900 trillion in assets in the world, so money is abundant, money is everywhere. It's time that's scarce. So as we were talking about before, use your time wisely. Read those books while you drive. Listen to those free books while you drive. It will, in the long run, make you money. It just sounds weird. Hey, how do you read a book and make money? Well, you learn about money. You learn about not being ripped off from the banks, the way the banks have been, that's the way they're making their money, folks, is off their little scheming of, $15 a month in fees, or your mortgage, 4, 7, 8% right now. So great books on how to reduce any debt whatsoever and how to make yourself more wealthy. One of the basic tips, of course, is spend less money than what you earn. And if you suddenly start making more money, save more money, don't spend more money. and start saving when you're young, ideally when you're 18, 16, 18, 20, and hopefully you retire when you're 40 or 45. If you got a great idea, do start with your idea today. Even if you're not ready, start today and things will come together for you. Remember, folks, here at Crypto News Global, you're not only watching Crypto News Global, you are the fabric of Crypto News Global. So if you haven't done so, please do subscribe, and it definitely helps grow the channel. Also, please share, like, and comment, and we will see you on the next stream. Folks, thanks so much for joining.